do want to ask you this question. Have you ever been frustrated waiting on God? Have you ever been frustrated waiting on God? In his book, A Grief Observed, author C.S. Lewis shares his raw and honest reflection after the death of his wife, Joy Davidman. In one poignant moment, he compares his experience of seeking God during his profound grief to encountering a door slammed in his face. He says, but go to God, he says. Go to him when your need is desperate, when all other help is vain. And what do you find? A door slammed in your face and a sound of bolting and double bolting on the inside. And after that, silence. Lewis compares his experience of seeking God during profound grief to encountering silence. In fact, encountering a slammed door and then silence. No response in the way that he wished, wanted, or thought God would act. And so this stark imagery captures Lewis's frustration and a sense of abandonment as he questions God's goodness amidst sorrow. Like Lewis, this great Christian author, apologist of the faith, we all have or will have moments we just can't seem to understand God's mercy in light of our suffering or in light of our waiting. So, have you ever been frustrated waiting on God? If so, friends, I believe the book of Numbers will be a helpful guide for us to help us understand God's character, his presence and work in the midst of suffering and waiting. So let's jump into the story and have a quick overview of the book. And the book itself can be broken into three parts, these three movements. So the first one, preparing to travel. So there, as a people are preparing to travel. Then second part of the book, chapters 13 to 25, they actually refuse to enter this promised land. And in part 3, the last 10 chapters, is preparing to enter again. So those are the three parts of the book. And so the first one, preparing to travel, we find Israel as this nation of former slaves. They're now free, but they're disoriented. They've camped at Mount Sinai for a year now. They've been there for a whole year, learning to live as God's people, learning to be human again after having their humanity stripped when they were slaves in Egypt. God is giving them instructions. He's giving them laws. He's teaching them, this is what a vision of humanity looks like. This is what it looks like to treat each other well. This is what it looks like to be humans again. God instructs them to arrange their whole camp, placing the tabernacle, God's presence, right at the center of their community. And this arrangement is a powerful symbol. God wants to dwell among his people. He wants them to center their lives, their hopes on him. But what we're meant to see, what we're supposed to see here, is they long for predictability of even slavery. Freedom in the wilderness is unpredictable. They don't even know what it means to be human quite yet. They're figuring things out, and they don't even understand God yet. And so they long for slavery. And so we start this first part of the book, we start with this great theme that has been the underlining, the current, the nagging question right from the start of the whole story of God. It's right here in this place. As they complain, as they cry, as they long for slavery, that nagging question of the whole story from the start is here. Will people trust God and center their lives in partnership with him? Or will they choose to decide for themselves what is good and evil? And will they turn away from God based on their own expectations and decisions? Which leads us to the second part, the second movement of the book, which is now they refuse to enter the promised land. It's here that we now observe the Israelites reaching the border. They come to the promised land, and some of you may know this story. There's songs about it. 12 spies, they go out to scout the territory. 2 spies, Caleb and Joshua, return with confidence in God's provision. They're sure that God is gonna, this is good. God is with us. We're okay. But 10 other spies return and talk about giants and danger, spreading fear among the people. And so the Israelites refuse to enter the land. So much so that their lack of trust in God, so great is their lack of trust in God that they are in fact convinced that God is actually out to destroy them. So despite all the things they have seen, they quite can't trust God. They can't trust God. They think he's out to get them. When things get tough, God must not love us. When things get difficult, God must not be for me. God must not care. All these ideas are tying to the character of God. The thing is, if you're a reader of the Bible and you get to the Numbers part and you're reading to this thing, we may be fooled to read it in a way that we think that God actually can't be trusted. We may be fooled to read this part of the scriptures to believe that, yeah, God actually then doesn't let them go in, and it's God's fault, and God is kind of angry. But that's actually not what's happening here, is it? They're crying out to God that we rather die than go here. And so what does God do? God honors their choices. He will not force. He will not trick. He wants what's best for them, for sure, but he will honor their choices, even their bad ones. Which leads us to the final and third movement or part of the book, and we come to preparing to enter the land again. So 40 years later, the next generation stands at the edge of the promised land. There's a new census, there's more numbers, it happens, it's true. And God begins instructing them on how to live once they enter. He continually keeps saying, this is what it looks like to center your life on me. This is what it looks like if you follow me. This is what it will look like if you allow me to lead you. He gives them laws on how to live, yes. All of which aim to bless the people in ways that God has intended to bless them since the Garden of Eden. If people follow God's commands, they will recover the ability to see God's image in themselves and in others. They'll be able to enjoy the promised land and all its goodness. If they listen, they will not turn the place into Egypt, a place of slavery and oppression, which is a really interesting moment here because it does seem that in the story of God that the gravitational pull when people don't listen to God, where they choose their own way, the gravitational pull seems to be to slavery and oppression. So, what is the good news of the book of Numbers? Why is this part of our story? What is the good news? Let me just suggest a few key takeaways. First and foremost, the book of Numbers urges us to notice, to see, and to remember both in this story and in our own lives that God's faithfulness amid our own failures. The book of Numbers tells the story of God's unwavering faithfulness to his covenant, to his promises, to his people, even though they fail repeatedly. Now, the second reason the book of Numbers offers us good news is that it reminds us of God's presence in the wilderness. The truth is, all of us will face our own wilderness, our own suffering, our own moments, our low moments. At some point, we will experience times of frustration, suffering, loneliness, loss, illness, death, and brokenness. We will. Book of Numbers reminds us the good news that it's natural, yes, for us to feel alone. It's even kind of natural for us to question, like, am I being punished? Or is God, can God be trusted? We might even be tempted to feel that God is distant, chaotic, or impersonal. However, Numbers, fourth book of the Torah, this ancient book reminds us that God is present, profoundly present in our suffering, in our wilderness, just as he was for the Israelites. Now finally, Numbers is good news for us in this third point, which is to trust God in difficult seasons. It's a lesson for us to learn to trust him even in the difficult seasons, to trust that he's there and to trust that he's for us. The Israelites' refusal to enter the promised land due to fear mirrors our own reluctance to trust God's plans when life doesn't quite go the way we thought it would. Numbers reveals that God is continually inviting us to place him at the center of our lives, at the center of our community, at the center of our being. Not out of obligation, but for our own good. His invitation is a call to trust in his plan. and experience the fullness of life he offers.